chat about Ford versus Ferrari, which is a movie that we went to see on Friday, the day it came out.
Yep, just came out this Friday.
Do you want to give an overview of what it's about?
Sure. So the movie is about the turmoil between the companies Ford and Ferrari in the 60s. Ford wanted to go racing. They actually almost bought Ferrari at one point in time, but the deal fell through, which made Henry Ford II very mad. So he built a race team. They ended up developing the Ford GT40, and they won a bunch of races at Le Mans.
Right, so it follows the story of Carroll Shelby, who was a race car driver who ended up working for Henry Ford, who was actually Henry Ford II, but we think it was the OG Henry Ford's grandson. Anyway, it was unclear in the movie. But they followed the story of Carroll Shelby, who was the main character, played by Matt Damon, going to work for Henry Ford II to develop this racing division for Ford.
Correct. And the movie was actually more about the relationship between Carroll Shelby and the racing driver Ken Miles, who was portrayed by Christian Bale. It was really their friendship that was the main point of the story, which was really cool to see.
Right, that was probably my favorite part of the movie, was their relationship and their friendship. It's funny because it kind of shows the trials and tribulations of two friends working together.
Right.
But in a very entertaining way. We don't want to give away too much of the movie, but some of the other characters that we really liked were the portrayal of Enzo Ferrari, who I'm not actually sure of the actor's name, but he was portrayed as pretty much the ultimate car guy and really cared about the cars, cared about the racing, was very invested, which is sort of a contrast to how Henry Ford II was portrayed. He was portrayed as less of a car enthusiast, more of just a businessman trying to carry on his family's name as, a large automobile
Right, the greatest car manufacturer, or American car manufacturer at the time.
Right, exactly. So overall, the characters were really good. One thing I didn't love as far as characters was the emphasis placed on Ken Miles' relationship with his family. They followed his wife and his son a lot, and the son angle was just sort of the, oh, look, I'm really invested in my dad's racing career. How cool that my dad's a race car driver. I didn't think that added a ton. I really preferred just focusing on the relationship between Shelby and Miles, but it didn't really take away from anything. It just seemed kind of extra.
Yeah, I thought that was a decent part of the movie. I thought the relationship between Ken Miles and his wife and his son added to some of the turmoil. He almost didn't go to Le Mans, and that was a large part of it, so I did think it was a good part of the story.
Alright, so another thing I really loved about the movie was the sets and the costumes and basically everything that made it feel very authentically mid-1960s. I love all stories set in the 50s and the 60s, as well as antiques from that time period, basically all, those relics of the past. And I thought it was really beautifully done. The scenery and the sets and the costumes and everything like that, it was just very beautiful and vintage and retro, and I really enjoyed that part.
Yeah, very fun to watch. And of course the cars were great. The GT40, of course, was the main star of the movie, but of course, being Carroll Shelby, you got to see some of the Cobras that he was working on. You got to see some of the insides of the shop. I don't know how accurate it was to his shop or how they made the cars or anything, but it was still cool to see a representation of that. There was one point where he was driving a Porsche Spider that was beautiful. You get to see all the vintage Ferraris that race and everything, so that was a huge aspect of it. And the sound was incredible. Hearing all the vintage race car sounds was really fun to watch.
Definitely. And not just the the cars and all of that themselves were great, but also the racing scenes specifically, they incorporated a lot of scenes, you know, on the track.
Right.
It was sort of the flow of the movie was, the conclusion was at Le Mans, but there were a bunch of races and scenes.
Yeah, you got to see Daytona and a few other racetracks, which was really fun.
And that racing footage was really beautiful, and it was also pretty exhilarating. You were kind of on the edge of your seat at some moments.
And also very authentic. There wasn't too many technical things. Sometimes big Hollywood movies can get a lot of race car aspects wrong. There was a few things, like they were sometimes when the race car drivers just seemed to push the pedal down farther to go faster.
Right.
And obviously if you're racing, most of the time if you're on a straightaway, you're going to have your foot to the floor. Also, there was a few scenes that were sped up. You could tell they were using sped up footage. The windshield wipers were going very fast. They would cut to another shot and the windshield wipers were going a lot slower. But realistically, that didn't take away from the movie too much.
Right, and my only car person pet peeve was there was this sort of refrain through the movie glamorizing that something happens when you cross 7,000 RPMs, and that just doesn't make a ton of sense. Yes, driving can be exhilarating, pushing your car is exhilarating, but there's nothing magical about 7,000 RPMs. I did kind of understand why they were saying that. It was so that they could cut to the gauges in the race car and see him pushing into the red line area between 7,000 and 8,000 RPMs and have that mean something to the viewer.
Yeah, specifically the GT40's cutoff was near 7,000 RPM.
Right. But they said it in a little bit more meta way. Like there was something magical that happened there, and that was just, it was not cringy or anything, I won't say, but it was just a little eye-rolly how many times they said that. But that's definitely a nitpick. Overall, I really enjoyed the movie.
Yep,
I would definitely recommend it.
Yeah, a huge recommendation. Even if you're just more into the history, it's fun. Even if you're not a pure car person, but car people should definitely go see it. It's a very fun movie. So in conclusion, go see Ford vs. Ferrari.
Definitely.